Nora Voss had been smiling for 6 hours, and her face was starting to file a formal complaint. She stood near the far wall of the conclave reception hall with a glass of something purple and warm that the station menu called a welcoming blend, and that tasted, to her, like someone had boiled a gym bag. She did not put it down. Putting it down meant her hands had nothing to do. Hands with nothing to do got her into trouble. The hall was enormous. Everything on Veth Station was enormous, because the Karathi had built it, and the Karathi were 7 feet tall on a short day and had never once in their architectural history considered that other species might feel like ants inside their buildings. The ceilings were so high that the light faded before it reached them, and the walls were pale gold and carved with patterns that the station brochure described as a celebration of conclave unity, and that Nora privately thought looked like a very expensive headache. She watched the room. The Velhari delegation stood in a cluster near the food table, their pale blue skin catching the overhead light, speaking in low tones and occasionally glancing at the human corner the way you glance at something you're not sure is dangerous or just weird. The Dreth sat. They always sat. Their lead diplomat, an old one named Orvin, whose face had the particular stillness of someone who had stopped being surprised by anything approximately 200 years ago, held a drink he had not touched and observed the hall like he was doing math. Nora liked the Dreth, but she trusted them the way you trust something ancient and quiet, carefully and from a small distance. The Karathi were everywhere. This was their station. They moved through the room with the specific ease of people who had never had to explain themselves to anyone. Bright robes brushing the floor, laughing in the sharp, two-note way their species laughed, which always sounded to human ears like someone testing a car horn. And then there was her delegation. Cal Pruitt was at the food table. He had been at the food table for 20 minutes. He was currently holding something that was clearly decorative, a tall spun glass centerpiece that was absolutely not food, and examining it with the focused interest of a man seriously considering eating it anyway. Nora walked over. "That's a sculpture," she said. Cal looked at her, but looked at the sculpture. "It smells like something." "Everything in here smells like something. Put it down." He put it down. He picked up something else, a small bowl of dark pellets that the table card described in a language neither of them could read. He ate one. His expression did not change. "How is it?" Nora asked. "I cannot tell if that was food or a button," he said. Across the room, Dex Hollis was standing very still near the door, with the look of a man trying to remember if he had turned off a stove on a planet 14 light years away. He was 26 and perpetually underslept, and had a badge lanyard around his neck that he had already lost and retrieved twice today. As Nora watched, he reached up, touched the lanyard, confirmed it was there, and exhaled like he had personally defeated something. She felt a familiar, tired affection for both of them. The three of them were Earth's diplomatic presence at the 40th Conclave Mixer, 40 years since humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel. 40 years since they had shown up in galactic space, loud and curious and entirely unprepared for how funny everyone else would find them. 40 years of being patted on the head, given a small seat at the table, and treated with the gentle amusement of a species that everyone agreed was colorful but not quite serious. Nora was aware, in the precise and clinical way she was aware of most unpleasant things, that this was the night before a vote that could end that seat entirely. The conclave was considering reclassifying humanity as a dependent civilization. Not an enemy, not a threat, just a child. A supervised advisory role. A seat with no vote. She had known for 3 weeks. She had been told to smile and not make it worse. She was very good at smiling. She was less certain about the second part. The Karathi attaché who approached her was named something with 6 syllables that translated roughly to bright river, and who had the particular bright-eyed curiosity of someone who genuinely thought she was being friendly. She was not cruel. She was something harder to deal with than cruel. She was simply certain. "Diplomat Voss," she said, and her common language was smooth and precise. "I have been wanting to ask you something, for a study." "Of course," Nora said. "Your species, humans, you have a documented history of treating armed conflict as entertainment, recreational combat, competitive violence. Your scholars have written about this extensively." She tilted her head. Her iridescent neck frills caught the light. "Can you explain the psychological mechanism? We find it—" She smiled, and 3 other delegations nearby leaned in slightly, listening. "We find it very interesting." The room was not silent, but the pocket around them had gotten quiet in the specific way pockets get quiet when everyone in them is pretending not to listen. Nora looked at the attaché. She looked at the small audience that had assembled with the casual expertise of people who had been watching humans for entertainment for 4 decades. She thought about the vote tomorrow. She thought about the word dependent. She thought about 40 years of being the joke everyone already knew the punchline to. She set her purple drink down very carefully on a passing server's tray. "I could explain it," she said. Her voice was the same temperature it always was, level, dry, giving nothing away. "The psychology, the history. I have a 30-page briefing document on the subject if you'd like a copy." The attaché smiled. Her entourage smiled. "But," Nora continued, "if you're more of a hands-on learner, you could wait until tonight. I imagine we'll have a live demonstration at some point." A soft ripple of amusement moved through the group. The attaché laughed. It was a bright sound, generous even. The laugh of someone who had heard a funny thing said by someone who could not possibly mean it seriously. "You are very entertaining," she said warmly. "That's one word for it," Nora said. Cal appeared at her elbow. But he had gotten a real drink from somewhere. He raised it slightly in the attaché's direction. The attaché smiled at him the way you smile at a large, friendly, vaguely unpredictable animal. They moved away. Cal waited until they were out of earshot. "That last part," he said. "The demonstration comment. You weren't joking." "I never joke at work, Cal." He looked down at his drink. He smiled. Not the public smile, the other one. The one that only ever showed up when he thought something was about to get genuinely interesting. "Lord have mercy on every soul in this room," he said quietly and sincerely, and drank. Dex appeared from nowhere, lanyard in hand, badge unclipped and dangling. He held it up. The clip was broken. He stared at it with the expression of a man confronting a personal betrayal. "But I need a paperclip," he said. "Hardware stores 14 light years that way," Cal said. Dex looked at Nora. Nora reached into her jacket pocket and produced a paperclip with the flat calm of someone who had been carrying paperclips to diplomatic events since her 3rd year in the service. Dex took it, looked at her. "How did you—" "I know who I work with," she said. She picked her drink back up, looked across the room at the Karathi attaché, still laughing with her friends, still glancing back at the human corner with that warm, bright, entirely unworried smile. Tomorrow there was a vote. Tonight there was a bar at the end of the docking ring. Nora was not a person who planned things. She was a person who saw things clearly and then stood very still and waited for the shape of them to become obvious. And the shape of tonight was becoming very obvious. Rallo's was the kind of bar that existed in every docking ring of every station in the known galaxy, regardless of who built the station or what species ran it. It had low light and loud music and tables that were slightly sticky for reasons no one investigated. It smelled like 3 different kinds of alcohol and 1 kind of burnt electrical wire. It was, By every measurable standard, not a good place. Nora loved it immediately. She found a table in the back, slid into the seat that faced the door, and put her jacket over the chair next to her so Cal couldn't sit there and start a conversation with strangers. Cal sat across from her. Dex sat beside Cal and put his datapad on the table, and then his badge lanyard next to the datapad, and then a small collection of drink coasters he had been accumulating from other tables without explanation. He started building a pyramid with them. "You're doing it again," Cal said. "I'm not doing anything," Dex said. "The coaster thing. I'm just organizing." Cal looked at the pyramid, looked at Dex, looked back at the pyramid, let it go. Nora ordered something dark and local that the bartender, a four-armed Velhari who moved with the efficiency of someone who had personally served 10,000 bad nights, brought over without expression. Cal ordered something with the word fire in the name, which on this part of the station probably meant it literally. And Dex ordered water, and then changed his mind and ordered something small and mild, and held it with both hands like it might escape. For a while, they just sat. This was the part of diplomatic postings that the briefing documents never mentioned. The sitting, the decompression, the specific silence of three people who had been performing all day and were now in a room where nobody was watching and could finally just breathe in the same direction. Sable Rice was at the bar. Nora had not seen her at first. She was the kind of person who occupied space without announcing it. A merchant captain in her 50s, with short gray-streaked hair and a jacket that had been repaired in 4 places and had earned every patch. She had a drink that was 3/4 gone, and she was watching the room the way an experienced sailor watches weather. She caught Nora's eye, raised her glass slightly. Nora raised hers back. Sable Rice had been running cargo routes in this sector for 15 years. She spent more time in galactic space than on Earth. She knew what humans looked like from the outside, had seen it from every angle, every species version of it. And she had a way of being quiet that meant she was processing things she would only say if you asked her directly. Nora did not ask. Not yet. Dex knocked over his coaster pyramid and rebuilt it. He had been the one to intercept the transmission. 3 weeks ago, at a relay station 2 systems out, a conclave administrative signal had passed through their ship's frequency band, unencrypted because the conclave had never found it necessary to encrypt things from humans, which told you everything you needed to know, and Dex had caught it and decoded it and sat very still in the communications bay for about 4 minutes and then brought it to Nora. She had read it, folded it, set it on the console. "Okay," she had said. That was it. That was the whole conversation. But she had noticed since that night that Dex's coaster pyramids had gotten more complicated. The music in Rallo's was something with a heavy, low beat that seemed to come from the floor more than the speakers. A few Velhari were dancing near the far wall. Their species danced by standing very still and moving only their upper limbs, which always looked to human eyes like slow-motion traffic direction. Cal watched them. "I could do that," he said. "You could not," Nora said. "I feel like I could." "Please don't." He didn't. He drank his fire something and looked content, and that specific relaxed version of ready that Nora had learned over 5 years of working beside him meant he was having a good time and also would not hesitate for a single second if the situation called for him to have a different kind of good time. Cal Pruitt was the military attaché. On paper, this meant he was there for security assessments and protocol compliance. In practice, it meant he was the person Nora pointed at problems that couldn't be talked out of existence. He was very good at his job. He was also the kind of person who, if you asked him why he had chosen a career that regularly put him in hostile environments in foreign star systems surrounded by species who outmassed him by a factor of 3, would say something like, "Well, it beats boredom," with complete sincerity. But Nora trusted him completely. She also kept a private list of phrases that meant things were about to escalate, and "I am having a real good time right now" was at the top of it. The Karathi arrived an hour later. There were 6 of them. Not the formal delegation, just the social wing. Robes traded for something more casual, already loud, already bright. Okar was with them. He was the one Nora had heard about but not met. A noble's son, 3rd tier, which in Karathi terms meant he had enough status to go anywhere and enough distance from real power to never have faced consequences for it. He was handsome in the way things built to be looked at are handsome. He moved like someone who had never needed to move around anyone else. He saw the humans. He said something to his group. They laughed, that 2-note car horn sound. Diane settled at a table diagonal to theirs. Not close, but angled so that Okar had a sight line. He was watching them the way the attaché had watched them earlier, that particular brand of entertained attention, fond, amused, the way you watch something that can't watch back. "He's doing a thing," Cal said, not looking up from his drink. "I know," Nora said. "What kind of thing?" "The kind where he explains us to his friends." Dex knocked over his coaster pyramid, did not rebuild it, just looked at the scattered coasters. He put them in a straight line instead, moved them around, rearranged them 3 times. His drink was untouched. His earpiece, the comm unit that linked to the ship, was looped around 2 fingers on his right hand, not in his ear, just held. Rotated slowly. Nora moved her glass to the side. Gave him more table space. He looked at her. She was looking at her drink. He spread the coasters out farther, rebuilt the pyramid. Smaller this time, steadier. Okar's voice carried. Common language, smooth and projected, the volume of someone used to rooms that belonged to him. He was saying something about observation behavior in younger species. He was saying something about neurological variants. He was saying the conclave study from 11 years ago and aggression response and design limitation, and his friends were leaning in and nodding with the bright, engaged faces of people hearing interesting information about something that could not be harmed by being talked about. Cal set down his drink. It made a small sound on the table. Nora said, "Cal!" "I'm fine," he said. "I know. I stay fine." He picked his drink back up. Okar said, loudly enough that it was clearly no longer accidental, "What is remarkable is that they are aware of it. They know how they are perceived. They come anyway." A pause. Another note of laughter from his table. It's almost admirable, isn't it? Like watching something that doesn't know it should be embarrassed." The bar was not quiet, but their corner of it had developed an audience. Dex had stopped moving the coasters. His earpiece had stopped rotating. He was very still in the way small animals go still when something larger is nearby, and his eyes were fixed on the coasters, and he was breathing very carefully. Cal looked at Nora. She looked at her drink, then at the table diagonal to theirs, then back at her drink. "Tomorrow," she said very quietly, "there is a vote." "Yes," Cal said. "Keep that in mind." "I will absolutely keep that in mind," Cal said. He smiled. It was the wrong smile. Nora recognized it the way you recognize weather. Sable Rice from the bar set down her glass very gently and moved it 3 inches to the left, away from the edge, away from where it might fall if the table shook. Nora noticed. She did not say anything. She was very good at smiling. She was less certain, had always been less certain, about the second part. It started with a shove. Not a real shove. Not something with weight or heat behind it. Okar reached across the space between the tables and pushed his open palm against Cal's shoulder. Light, almost lazy, the gesture of someone moving a thing that was in the way. The way you brush something off a counter. The way you clear a space you had already decided was yours. Cal went 3 inches to the left. He looked down at his shoulder, at the exact spot where Okar's hand had landed. The expression on his face was very calm and entirely unreadable, which was, in Nora's experience, the most specific kind of warning. "Cal," she said. He looked up at OKR. OKR was still smiling. His friends were watching. The bar had gotten quiet in a specific way, not fully silent, but the kind of almost quiet where everyone is pretending very hard not to listen while listening to everything. "You were in my light," OKR said, in common, pleasant and matter-of-fact. Cal blinked once, looked back at Nora. Nora said, "Think about the vote." And she meant it. She said it clearly and directly, and she looked him in the eye when she said it. She was asking him to remember tomorrow, the conclave chamber, the seats, the word dependent written in conclave administrative font, calm and final and small. She watched him think about it. 1 second. 2. He nodded slowly, looked back at OKR, and then he headbutted a 7-foot Karathi noble with the clean, committed efficiency of a man who had made a decision and was at peace with it. OKR went back into his table hard enough to flip it. The bar exploded. Not with sound at first, with motion. 6 Karathi on their feet at once, a rushing sound like wings, the scrape of chairs going back across the floor from every direction. Nora was standing before she knew she had decided to stand. Dex knocked over his coaster pyramid for the final time and did not look at it. The first Karathi bodyguard who came at Cal was a large one, wide through the shoulders, with the specific momentum of someone who had never been in a fight where the other person stayed upright. He hit Cal center mass. Cal went back 2 steps, made a sound like someone who had been surprised by something but wasn't bothered by it, and came back in lower, under the bodyguard's reach, with a precision that was not rage, was something more focused and more cheerful than rage. "Lord have mercy on every soul in this room," Cal said, almost to himself, and he sounded like he meant the mercy part sincerely. Dex threw a bar stool. This was, by all logic, the wrong decision. Dex was a communications officer, but he had a degree in applied signal theory and an unbroken record of avoiding physical altercation that stretched all the way back to a middle school incident he still refused to discuss. He looked at the stool, looked at the second bodyguard crossing toward Cal, made a face like a man watching himself do something outside his own body. He threw the stool anyway. It hit the bodyguard across the upper arm, not hard enough to stop him, but hard enough to turn his head. Hard enough to create 1 second of confused attention. 1 second was enough for Cal. Dex immediately looked horrified at himself. He stood very still, hands out, empty. Then a third, Karathi, came at him from the side. Dex picked up a second stool, threw it. Less horrified this time. Nora, meanwhile, had a chair. Not because she'd planned to. And she had been moving toward the door. That had been the plan: diplomatic removal, get out, preserve the situation. And something had clipped the back of her heel, and she had grabbed the nearest object for balance, and the nearest object had been a chair, and she had looked at it and looked at the room and done a very fast and clear-headed calculation. She broke the chair. Deliberately. Against the edge of the table, the way you break kindling. Clean pieces. She examined them for half a second with the focused attention of a person doing quality control. Kept 2. Handed one to Dex as she passed him. Dex looked at it. "I feel like this is not—" he started. A Karathi knocked his datapad off the table. His face changed, not with rage, with something simpler and more specific. That was his datapad. His personal datapad with 3 years of signal logs and his mother's messages and a half-finished letter he had been writing since last December. He stopped thinking about what he was supposed to be doing. He started thinking about what was in front of him. The bar was not a clean fight. Clean fights happened in training rooms with mats on the floor and referees and a clear sense of where the other person's limits were. This was tables and spilled drinks and a Velhari diplomat from the next booth over who had wandered in for a refill at the exact wrong moment and was now pressed against the wall with the expression of someone deeply reconsidering their evening plans. The Karathi were bigger, stronger, better built for raw force. Every single one of them hit harder than any of the three humans. Cal took a blow to the side of his face that opened a cut above his cheekbone and stepped back and touched it and looked at his fingers and smiled in a way that had absolutely nothing to do with finding anything funny. He came back in. This was the part that nobody in the bar could quite process. Not the fighting. Fighting was understandable. Fighting was a known thing. It was the part after the hits landed. It was Cal taking a force that should have ended the conversation and treating it as new information and adjusting and continuing. It was Dex, bleeding from a split on his forearm, still holding his chairpiece, still in the room, still in the fight. It was Nora, a diplomat. Like a woman whose professional entire value was language and precision and restraint, methodically making sure that every Karathi in the room was paying attention to all three of them at once. They were not winning. That was not the point. They were not stopping. That was. Okar, from the floor where Cal's first move had put him, had gotten back to his feet. His robe was torn at the shoulder. His expression had gone through amusement and anger, and something past anger that did not have a clean name in common. He was watching Cal. Cal was bleeding. Cal was grinning. Cal had the specific loose-limbed posture of a man who had found his natural environment and was operating at full comfort within it. "You're insane," Okar said. It was not an insult, quite. It was more like a classification, like a person seeing something they had read about in a textbook and finally understanding what the textbook meant. Cal looked at him. "Yeah, buddy," he said. He held out his hand. Not in a fight, open, palm up, an offer. Okar looked at it, looked at Cal's face, the blood, the grin, the complete absence of anything that looked like embarrassment or regret. Looked at the room. His bodyguards had stopped. Dex had stopped, still holding his chairpiece, breathing hard. Nora had stopped. The bar had gone quiet in a different way than before. Not the almost quiet of an audience, the full quiet of something that had crossed a line and everyone in the room knew it. Okar looked at the offered hand. He took it. Cal pulled him to his feet with a steady, unhurried grip. Nobody spoke. Station security was outside the door. Nora could see two figures through the bar window standing on the other side, apparently having made a group decision to wait until the situation resolved itself. Smart, she thought. She set her chair piece down on the nearest table that was still upright. She straightened her jacket. One button was gone. The collar was turned wrong. She fixed both of these things with the same careful attention she gave to diplomatic documents, because details were details. "Well," Cal said, looking around the bar with genuine satisfaction. "Don't," Nora said. "I was just going to say, I know what you were going to say." He closed his mouth, but the grin stayed. Dex found a corner of a table that was still standing and sat on it. He was holding his forearm. He looked at the room. And he looked at the Velhari diplomat, still pressed against the wall. He looked at his data pad on the floor, face down, possibly cracked, and slid off the table and picked it up and turned it over, and the screen was intact, and he closed his eyes for a second and exhaled with the relief of a man who had survived two things tonight instead of one. Sable Rice was at the bar. She still had her drink. It was somehow still mostly full. She looked at Nora. She looked at the room. She took a sip. "Well," she said. "Don't you start either," Nora said. The bar looked like a math problem someone had given up on. Tables were overturned, chairs were in places, chairs had no reason to be. Something was dripping from the ceiling that had not been dripping before the night started. And the Velhari diplomat, who had wandered in during the worst possible 2 minutes, was still against the wall, very still, with the expression of a person deciding whether this was something they would tell people about or a story they would take to the grave. Nora stood in the middle of it and did what she always did when things were bad. She assessed. 3 humans, standing. Cal had a cut above his cheekbone and a bruise forming along his jaw that was going to be deeply impressive by morning. Dex had a split on his forearm that had stopped bleeding. Nora's collar was straight again. Her button was gone and was not coming back, but that was a tomorrow problem. 6 Karathi, none of them in fighting shape. Okar was upright, standing near the overturned wreckage of his table, his robe torn. Looking at Cal with an expression Nora could not fully read. Not anger, not quite. Something that had been anger and had passed through it and come out the other side into something quieter and more honest. Sable Rice was at the bar. She had gotten a fresh drink from somewhere. The 4-armed Velhari bartender had apparently decided that tonight qualified as an extended shift and was methodically wiping down the counter behind her as though tidying was the appropriate response to the complete destruction of his establishment. Station security was still outside. Nora could see them through the window. 2 figures, neither moving. Good, she thought again. Smart. And then the Dreth walked in. There were 3 of them, Orvin in the front, 2 junior members a step behind. They moved through the door and stopped. So Orvin looked at the room. He looked at the tables and the chairs and the dripping ceiling and the Velhari diplomat flattened against the wall and the 3 humans standing in the middle of it all, slightly battered and still present. His face did not change. This was the thing about Orvin. His face never changed in the way that young species' faces changed, with every thought visible, every reaction broadcasting. He had the stillness of something very old that had learned a long time ago to think before its expression did. He was 500 years old in a species that could live 800. He had watched civilizations rise and get their first ships and arrive in galactic space excited and full of ideas. He had watched most of them fold within a century. Then he walked across the bar and sat down at the one table that was still upright. He looked at Nora. "Diplomat Voss," he said. "Ambassador Orvin," she said. "Please sit." She sat across from him. The chair wobbled. One leg was slightly bent. She sat on it anyway without acknowledging this, because Nora Voss did not acknowledge chairs. Cal stood a few feet away, arms crossed, looking at the ceiling. Dex had found a stool at the bar and was sitting on it with his data pad in his hands, checking it with the focused care of a parent checking on a child after a fall. The screen was intact. He had confirmed this 3 times. He was confirming it a 4th. Orvin folded his hands on the table. "We have been watching humanity for 11 years, he said. "I'm aware," Nora said. "You have been the subject of more conclave anthropological studies than any other species in the last 30 years. "I know." "There is a study from 8 years ago," Orvin continued in the same level tone, "that describes human pain tolerance as a neurological abnormality. There is one from 6 years ago that classifies human approach to mortal risk as a behavioral disorder." He paused. "These studies were not classified. They were published in the Conclave's open academic record." "I've read them," Nora said. "Both of them. The one from 6 years ago has a methodological issue in the 3rd section that their own peer reviewers flagged and that nobody in the Conclave press mentioned. But yes." Orvin looked at her for a long moment. "When your species accepted a seat at the Conclave," he said, "did you know how you were perceived?" Nora looked at him. The bar was very quiet. Sable Rice had put her drink down. Cal had stopped looking at the ceiling. "Of course," Nora said. "You knew." "We knew. And you came anyway." "We always come anyway," she said. "That's sort of the whole thing." Orvin was quiet. He looked at his hands on the table. He looked at Cal, at the cut and the bruise and the easy, unbothered posture. He looked at Dex on the stool, holding his data pad, which he had apparently decided to clean with the sleeve of his uniform. "I want to tell you something," Orvin said. "All right." "Tomorrow there is a vote," he said. Nora kept her face very still. I'm aware. The Karathi block has the numbers. The motion was going to pass. He paused. I say was with intention. She looked at him. The Dreth delegation is withdrawing its support for the reclassification motion, he said. As of tonight. The bar was very quiet. Dex stopped cleaning his datapad. He was looking at the back of Nora's head. Cal had uncrossed his arms and was watching Orvin with an expression that was not quite neutral anymore. Nora said very carefully, Because of a bar fight. Because of what I observed before, during, and after a bar fight, Orvin said. There is a difference. He looked at Dex. Dex looked back. Orvin's expression was unreadable, but his attention was specific and complete. Your communications officer, he said. When he learned of the vote, 3 weeks ago, I believe, what did he do? Nora said nothing. He informed you, Orvin said. You sat with it. You came to the mixer. You smiled. You answered questions. And you managed a diplomatic situation that was already being set against you. His voice was the same temperature it had been for the entire conversation, level, without heat. And tonight, when the situation moved past managing, your team responded. And then, he paused. The response ended, and you began doing the math for tomorrow. Nora said, That's just the job. No, Orvin said, that is not just the job. He was quiet for a moment. I have watched many species arrive in this space. I have watched them be dismissed and managed and placed in smaller and smaller seats until they understood their role and stayed in it. I have watched them accept the shape of how others saw them. He looked at his hands again. I have watched them stop coming anyway. Nora did not say anything. Your species, Orvin said. Dia does not do that. Dex had found a piece of wire on the bar counter. He did not know where it had come from, fallen from something, probably during the chaos. He was threading his badge through it, remaking the lanyard, reshaping the clip from scratch using the wire and his fingers and a button that had come off someone's uniform and was sitting on the counter next to the wire. He held it up, studied it. It was worse than the original. The button was the wrong color. The wire was slightly too long. It sat crooked when he put it around his neck. He put it on anyway and looked at Nora. She was watching him. Then her face did the thing it very rarely did, where the professional layer and the tired layer and the careful layer all went quiet for half a second, and what was underneath them was just a woman who had been carrying a very heavy thing for 3 weeks and had not put it down once. She turned back to Orvin. The other delegations, she said, the ones who usually follow the Karathi position. 4 of them have already been in contact with us tonight, Orvin said, since the fight. Since the fight. Nora processed this with the same expression she used for everything, level, dry, giving nothing away, but her hand on the table had gone very still. You're serious, she said. I am 500 years old, Orvin said. I have very little patience left for not being serious. Sable Rice picked up her drink again. She took a long sip. She looked at the ceiling, at the thing still dripping, and looked at the Velhari diplomat finally peeling himself off the wall and heading for the door with considerable speed, and looked at the overturned tables and the Karathi bodyguards helping each other sit up, and looked at Okar standing alone by the window, still and quiet, and watching something outside on the docking ring. She had been running cargo routes in this sector for 15 years. She had watched her species from the outside for 15 years. She had seen them through the eyes of the Velhari and the Dreth and the Karathi and a dozen others. She looked at Nora. She thought about saying something. She picked up her drink instead. Some things did not need saying. The conclave chamber was everything Rallows was not. High ceilings and clean light and seats arranged in a wide circle, every delegation placed at equal height, though the Karathi had somehow managed to get chairs that were slightly taller than everyone else's, which Nora had noticed on her first day, and filed away as the kind of detail that told you everything you needed to know about a civilization. She walked in at 9 in the morning with a bruise forming along her jaw from a hit she didn't fully remember taking, and a jacket she had borrowed from the ship because hers was missing a button and had what she strongly suspected was Karathi blue on the sleeve. Cal was to her right, dressed perfectly, bandage on his chin, with the calm and well-rested energy of a man who slept like a rock regardless of what preceded the sleeping. Dex was to her left, a badge lanyard around his neck, the new one, the wire and wrong button version, holding his datapad against his chest like a shield. They took their seats. The chamber filled. The Velhari delegation came in without looking at the human corner. The Dreth came in, and Orvin, passing behind Nora's chair, said nothing and did not slow his pace, but his hand touched the back of her chair for half a second as he passed. She looked straight ahead. Oka'ar came in with the Karathi block. He was wearing a new robe, deep red, no tears, and his frills were arranged in the formal position, which on a Karathi meant controlled and deliberate and ready to conduct business. He sat across the circle from the human delegation. He looked at Cal. Cal looked back. Neither of them said anything. Neither of them looked away. And something passed between them that had no name in common. The session chair called the chamber to order. The reclassification motion was third on the agenda. Before it came a trade dispute between two outer systems that took 40 minutes to go nowhere, and a proposal about beacon frequencies that Nora could have summarized in 4 words. Nobody agrees. Table it. And which took another 30. She sat through all of it with her hands flat on the table in front of her, and her face composed, and her eyes moving slowly around the circle, reading the room the way she had been trained to read it, looking for the small signals that told you where the current was running. The current was interesting. The Velhari rep, who usually sat in postures that could be described as politely absent, he was very still today in the specific way they went still when they were paying full attention. The small outer systems delegations, the ones who voted with whoever was loudest usually, because they were too new to the conclave to have built alliances of their own, were doing that thing where they watched without appearing to watch, heads angled slightly toward the human seats. Cal leaned over and said very quietly, "They're all looking at us." "I know," Nora said. "Is that good?" "I have no idea," she said. "Probably." Dex said nothing. He was running his thumb along the edge of his datapad in a slow, repetitive line, the same inch of edge over and over. His other hand was holding the badge lanyard, not adjusting it, just holding it. The trade dispute was tabled. The beacon frequency proposal was tabled. The session chair announced the reclassification motion. The room changed. Not loudly, just the specific quality of attention shifting, the way a crowd shifts when the thing everyone came to see finally starts. The motion was read aloud. Nora had heard it 3 weeks ago in a decoded transmission at a relay station 2 light years out. She had read it in conclave administrative font, calm and formal and precise. It sounded different out loud. It sounded smaller somehow and also more real. The vote opened. The Karathi bloc voted to proceed. 6 names. 6 yes votes. Okar voted without looking across the circle. The smaller, aligned delegations voted yes. 3 of them in sequence, quick and quiet. Then the Dreth voted. Orvin said no, simple, clean, not argued, not explained, just no. And in the flat tone of a civilization that had been in this chamber for 600 years and did not need to justify itself to the room. The chamber was quiet for a second. Then the first Outer Systems delegation voted no. Then the second. Then the Velhari rep, who had been very still all morning, said no in a voice that was steady and clear and louder than it needed to be. The 4th delegation that Orvin had mentioned the night before voted no. The session chair read the count. The motion failed. Nora did not move, did not exhale visibly, did not make any expression that could be read from across a circle of 27 delegations. She kept her hands flat on the table. She kept her face composed. She kept her eyes on the middle distance. Under the table, her right hand found Cal's arm and gripped it once and let go. Cal, who also did not move, who also did not change his expression, who was also staring at the middle distance with professional calm, pressed his arm back against her hand for half a second before she pulled away. Dex made a very small sound, not a word, just the involuntary exhale of someone whose lungs had forgotten to operate for the last 3 minutes and had just remembered. He looked down at his data pad, looked at the badge lanyard, the wrong color button, the too long wire, the thing he had built out of nothing in the wreckage of a bar the night before. He straightened it. The session moved on. Other business. The chamber's attention shifted to other things. The conclave kept going, because it always kept going. Because that was what the conclave did. It processed and tabled and voted and deferred, and the galaxy turned regardless. Nora sat through the rest of it. She found Sable Rice in the corridor outside afterward. It was not a grand corridor. It had the same pale gold walls as everything else on this station, the same high ceilings, the same carvings that looked like headaches. Sable was leaning against the wall with a cup of coffee. Real coffee, Earth import, the kind that cost more than it should this far from home. And she held it out as Nora approached. Nora took it, held it in both hands, stood next to Sable against the wall and drank. Neither of them spoke for a while. Down the corridor, Cal had stopped a junior Karathi attaché and appeared to be genuinely asking him for food recommendations on the station, fully relaxed, completely unbothered, as though the last 18 hours had been a pleasant detour and the day was now proceeding normally. The attaché looked confused. Cal did not notice or did not mind. "You knew it would work," Sable said. Nora thought about this honestly. "I knew Cal would headbutt him," she said. "That part I knew. But the rest?" A pause. She drank the coffee. It was very good. She thought about the relay station 2 light years out, and Dex's face when he had handed her the decoded transmission, and 3 weeks of smiling in halls that were too tall and drinking things that tasted like gym bags, and carrying something heavy without putting it down. "No," she said. "I just knew we had nothing left to lose by being exactly what they already thought we were." Sable nodded slowly. "Turns out," Nora said, "that was enough." She finished the coffee. Down the corridor, Dex had found a vending machine. It was a station standard unit, accepting the conclave credit chip that every delegation was issued at the start of a session. Dex was standing in front of it with his Earth currency card, his personal card, the one from home, the kind that worked on Earth and on human ships, and on the 3 human stations that existed in this part of the galaxy and absolutely nowhere else. He was trying to get it to work, pressing the card against the reader, pulling it back, pressing it again, tilting it slightly, pressing it again. The machine made a flat, rejecting sound each time, consistent and unhurried, the way machines sound when they are not even annoyed at you, just correct. Dex pressed the card again, and Cal had finished with the food recommendations and drifted over. He watched. He did not say anything. Dex pressed the card a 5th time. The machine rejected it a 5th time. Dex looked at the card, looked at the machine, tilted the card the other way, pressed it again. Cal hit the side of the machine with an open palm. The machine made a different sound, a thinking sound. A small light blinked. A cup dropped. Dex stared at it. He reached in and took the cup out. It was something hot and dark, and the machine's label called it warming blend, which probably meant it tasted like a gym bag. But it was hot, and it was from a machine that had said no 6 times, and it was his. He pumped his fist. Not ironically, not as a joke. Just a man who had wanted a thing and been told no and kept trying and gotten it. Cal put his hands in his pockets and started walking back toward the docking bay. Dex followed, drinking his warming blend, badge lanyard swinging slightly with the wrong color button. Nora watched them go. She thought about Orvin's voice the night before, the specific quiet in it when he said we have watched them stop coming anyway. She looked at the vending machine. She looked at Dex's retreating back. She thought, yeah, we do that. We just keep going. It is not brave, and it is not a strategy, and it is not something anyone planned. It is just the thing we do. She turned and walked toward the docking bay after them. The station corridor was very tall and very gold and very quiet. It was, she thought, a perfectly good place to walk through on the way to the next thing,